is the new platform, and so this is sort of the second in the series of webinars for the association. If you recall, Gary and Todd Burkhart did a webinar on the 7.0 contract back a few weeks ago. And now the new technology will allow for the webinars to be recorded, so hopefully the system will work correctly today, and the webinar will be recorded for the archives and become a part of the webinar library and a benefit to the members of the association. So I'm just going to go full screen. Yeah, okay. All right. So you guys should be able to see the presentation now, and we'll just start going through this whenever you're ready, Gary. All right. So just a quick introduction and a little quick information about myself. I'm a full-time realtor, managing broker licensee, although I do not manage, and I'm very committed as a volunteer leader to our organization, serving on many levels and many capacities over the years. Go ahead, Gary. And I hold these 16 realtor family and professional designations and certifications. We'll go through these fairly quickly. Boiling down some of my prior service, I've served on my local association, board of directors, executive committee, past president. I've chaired just about every committee at my local, served on several others. At the Illinois level, I've served on both executive board of directors and chaired, I think, about 6 committees. And go ahead. At the national level, similarly, I've served on exec board of directors, and most of my focus has been in the political aspect of the association, with many terms of service on many of the RPAC and Realtor Party committees. Go ahead. Currently, these are kind of big rocks. This is what I'm doing currently for the association at all 3 levels. I just want to kind of point out my service on the Illinois Association Professional Standards Committee. We have to know all of the state association forms as well as license law. We have to have a basic understanding of MRED and their rules and regs to be able to discern the issues when we get filings, either as professional standards for ombuds service or when I'm mediating for the state association. Go ahead. And that's just kind of an overall big picture view of what I've done over my service. So go ahead. A little bit of RPAC involvement. I won't go into detail on that, but to say that I've been a major investor in supporting RPAC since 2006. Go ahead. And just some of the things I've accomplished over the years of service. Go ahead. All right, so let's get into why we're here. Today, our expectations, just kind of these 3 things. So thank you for attending. That's sort of the first step to understanding and maybe changing some of your practices as a buyer agent or buyer's representative. Of course, what's really important is that we provide a professional consumer and client experience. Hopefully, number 2 there is self-explanatory. Hopefully you can focus and avoid distractions for the next 30 to 40 minutes. And of course, engage and participate. Use the chat bar if you have questions, and hopefully you just might learn something today. Go ahead. So these are our today's goals. We shared this out when we sent out the invitation with the title of today's program. We're going to cover all 5 of these things, sort of embedded in what you'll see in a moment. the actual Illinois Realtors forms that we have available to us for agency and buyer's agency specifically. And I've worked to embrace these documents in my business practice. Certainly if your office has policies or you have forms that your office wants you to use over and above these or instead of these, please check with your managing broker on that. But all of these forms are available on the Illinois website, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're going to talk about agency disclosure, how we all love to talk about agency and disclosure. It almost sounds like a CE class, but a lot of this stuff is kind of in that vein. So also we'll discuss how to discuss buyer's agency with your prospective buyer clients. We'll talk about how you might get your buyers to sign a buyer's agency agreement. And also, as a part of that, gives you the opportunity to have a conversation with your buyer clients about how buyer's agency compensation works. And also, the buyer's agency agreement, when unwritten, is of course somewhat enforceable if you have a arbitration that you have to fight for. If a buyer isn't loyal to you and you've shown them the property that they ultimately purchase, that's a lot of fight to go through to get compensated. So we hope that understanding how the buyer's agency agreement works and how you can make it work will help you to preserve your compensation. So go ahead, Gary. Let's talk about this thing called buyer's agency a little bit. So as I just mentioned a minute or two ago, what we're going to focus on today is a set of forms that you can find on IllinoisRealtors.org. You can see I've mapped the path to get you to these documents. You drill in, you have to be logged in as yourself with your Illinois Realtor login, and you click. Once you're logged in, you'll see the live link in the upper right-hand corner called Forms. You click that. The drop-down will come up. You click on Forms, Guides, and Downloads, and then there are 4 areas of that list where all these documents are found. Under Checklists, Consumer Resources, Agency, Dual Agency, and Non-Agency Forms, and Buyer and Seller Brokerage Agreements. So we're going to kind of go through these almost in this order. We'll get to the actual buyer's agreement last, but to get us there, I wanted to talk through these other documents. So we're going to talk about Illinois Realtors Form 343 first. Go ahead, Gary. It's just the list. So we can try to make this list available to you if you want the actual list. We'll figure out who's been on the call today, and if you'd like to get that list, we'll make arrangements to send it to you. But all these forms are there. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming to see the list of resources on the Illinois Realtors website. The list will help you just pick these out. Some of these I know you work with on the seller side already, like the consent to dual agency. Go ahead. So this is our first form, and Jerry, I don't know if we want to pull that up in the PDF version. Bear with us as we do this in such a way that you'll be able to see it a little better. We have all these forms pulled up so that we can display them to you. Hopefully this works out okay. If not, we'll just default back to the presentation. So this is Form 343, and this form was updated in July of 2016. All the forms, you'll notice when you do print them or use them, you'll see that there's a date at the bottom of those forms that shows you when the forms were updated. and all the forms are typically updated at the same time. And so when we use these forms, we should always make sure we're using the current version. Now, under the checklists on the website, these are just checklists that we as Realtor members can use when we work with our clients. There are other checklists out there from working with sellers and other checklists in general, but for today's meeting, I wanted to just show you, really focus on the top section of this document. These are all the things that the Illinois Realtors, based on license law, suggests that we do with our buyer clients before we really get started down the road of agency. So you'll see that as you look through these, some of these are almost the questions that you should answer, and then also the advice to use the forms or get things in writing. So, this is a great document, especially for my managing brokers out there who are looking for things to help their agents get started, their newer agents, to understand how they might be wanting to process and make sure that they're in compliance with license law. So our state association did a great job putting this particular checklist together, in my opinion. And the last thing at the bottom of the contract, of course, I said this earlier, above the form number on this document, that says that this form only be used if appropriate under your sponsoring broker's office policy. So again, make sure you're talking to your managing broker, your designated realtor, to make sure that they're in agreement with what's on here if you're going to use this form with your clients. I like to use this form when I'm having my clients fill out a contact information sheet, when I'm profiling my clients, to make sure that I cover the things that my trade association suggests that I cover. So if you would, Gary, we'll move on to the Consumer Guide to Real Estate Agency in Illinois. And this is a consumer document. It's two-sided. It has, at the top of page 1, it has, and then onto page 2, it has all of the things that the consumer might or should know, might want to know or should know about real estate agency in Illinois. And it's just a good piece that you can print out and use with your agents. Or with your consumers as agents. And, especially if you're doing like one-time showings or the like. I seldom use this form except in that situation, but if I'm going to be doing no agency, then I definitely want some of these in my briefcase so that I can use them if needed. The consumer can sign at the bottom right of page 1, and that can be torn off as a consumer copy. You can actually tear off the broker's portion of that and leave the consumer with their piece of or with the upper half of the document that is all the information about agency. And then I'd like to go to Form 350, which is the Notice of No Agency. And again, I sorted these in the order for a reason. I said that the consumer guide, I like to use that when I do no agency or one-time showings. And when we have that conversation with our prospective buyer clients, whether it's in some form of pre-counseling or whether it's meeting them for the first time in the driveway at the first house you're going to show them, hopefully you've determined what your agency relationship is going to be. And we're going to talk about that mostly when we get to disclosures of buyer's agency Form 349, but this is the document that you should potentially consider using if you're not going to represent the client, if you're going to work with them in a no agency fashion. There's a checkbox on there. There's a property address line at the top. And you'll notice on this form, at the top of the form, you see that I've customized this form. And if you download these forms to your desktop, all of the typical Illinois Realtor forms, when it has blanks in it, they are fillable. And so I print these off with as much information as I can pre-filled out so that I don't have to do this on the hood of my car if I don't have to. I just write the property address in ahead of time, go through what's in the body of the form, and then hopefully the consumer, in this case customer, would sign the document. And again, I'll keep repeating that my disclosure today that make sure that these your managing broker has approved you to use these forms. When it comes to like no agency or one-time showing forms, a lot of times the franchises or brokerages will have their own forms for this. But even if they do, sometimes those things get dated, and sometimes what I've found is that the Illinois Realtors are much more prudent and proficient in making sure their documents are up to date. So if you feel your managing broker or franchise documents are void of information, you might just be proactive and have a conversation with your managing broker about updating the forms to make sure that they're not only compliant but up to date in the best interest of the consumer or client. If we could move on to Form 335. And we've also probably all seen this one because one of the things that we're really good at as realtors is getting our clients, our seller clients, to sign all the appropriate documents at the time we sit down and do a listing agreement. And unfortunately, on the buyer side of representation, we tend to be our own worst enemy because we tend to avoid asking our buyers to sign anything until the 11th hour, or when we're trying to make our files right before closing occurs. And essentially, that is the wrong answer to do it that way. The right answer is to be proactive. I always pre-counsel with my buyer clients. It's rare that I don't do that. When I do pre-counsel, I go through all these forms, and I'll spend some time talking about the buyer's representation form and how I talk about that so that I can hopefully earn their loyalty before we all get in our cars and start opening lockboxes to see properties. But we've all seen the consent to dual agency form. You want to have your buyers, you want to at least give this to your buyers. At the bottom of this form, you'll see that you don't necessarily need the clients to sign it, but you can just use the box that says document presented on. Give them a copy of this. Tell them to read it so they understand what you can and cannot do when performing dual agency. And again, we're usually real good about explaining this when we're getting our sellers to sign the listing agreement, because they're going to have to consent to whether or not they want to allow us to perform dual agency. But with our buyers, sometimes we wait and procrastinate until we're walking up the driveway to have that conversation. This is a great form in two regards. It gets the disclosure into the consumer's hands in writing, but it also gives you the opportunity to have a conversation about what dual agency actually means and the things that they may have to sacrifice as a result of that. So, all right, how are we doing? Anybody have any questions on the chat thus far, or are we going to keep going here? All right, so I'll move now to Form 349. And this, if nothing else today, I hope you take away the significance of this document and maybe put, if nothing else, nothing else, put this document to use in your practice. This, you know, when we did our license law rewrite in Illinois in 2000 and the update in 2010, these forms were all updated and created as a result of new license law. And one of the things that this form does is clarify for the consumer their options for representation. So the whole bottom half of the form talks specifically about, in essence, you'll see there are 3 check boxes there, but there are 5 bullets. And all those bullets represent a way or an option that the consumer or client can decide to be represented. Now, you'll see that I've checked on my form. Again, this is a pre-fillable form, so I always have these buyer's agency forms in my briefcase and ready to go. But I've checked that last box, and that is my choice. That is my business practice. Some brokerages do not allow non-exclusive buyer representation. So again, make sure that you have that conversation with your managing broker about whether or not you're even allowed to do non-exclusive representation in your brokerage. And then either way, if it is your business practice to either be mandated by your brokerages or choose to do exclusive rights, exclusive buyer representation with the exclusive right to purchase contract, then like I have here, I've checked that box. And then I always choose to do the buyer's agency agreement form 338, which is the exclusive representation agreement with consent to dual agency built into it. The 338A form does not have dual agency in it. I don't use that document, so I am not uber familiar with the verbiage that's in it, but as I tell all of my clients that when we have that dual agency conversation, if I am going to represent them in dual agency, I tell them what, sacrifices that they will have to make in terms of services and my duties, but it's also, I also tell them that we're going to have that conversation again at the time we're going to cross over that bridge. In a situation where you're going to go out and show property and you know that's your listing, maybe they don't, you want to have that conversation again. And then knowing both of the clients on both sides of that potential transaction, you as an agent or practitioner may choose to not practice dual agency in that situation. You may know the personalities of your 2 clients and decide that that's not a road that you want to go down or a bridge you want to cross, and have that conversation at that moment. You can work on some scripts for that, and to the effect that, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I have this listing. My seller, while having allowed me in writing to practice dual agency, I don't always think that that's in everybody's best interest. And in this case, I'm going to refer you to another broker or agent to represent you on this one situation, on this one showing. In case you decide to write an offer, you'll have exclusive representation rather than dual agency representation. And you can do the same thing on the seller side. And I always have that conversation at the time of the listing agreement to tell them that while you're allowing me in writing to practice dual agency, it may not be the right thing to do given the particular buyer that might come along that I might break through. It might not be in everybody's best interest, so that I'll always have that conversation with them before I show the property if possible. Hopefully the buyer in that situation isn't hurrying to the showing, and you have some time to have conversations with both buyers and sellers about that before you get there. So, this form, if you don't use the actual exclusive rights to purchase contract, the 338 or 338A, this form is designed to be standalone or the cover sheet to those two other forms. So this form does everything you need to do, covers everything you need to cover with regards to buyer's agency. You've shared with them that they have options as a consumer. If they don't like your options, maybe they don't want to move forward and work with you. But again, we're often our own worst enemies in terms of giving our clients and the consumer good information so that they can make good decisions about probably their single largest investment in their lifetimes in their primary residence or an investment property. So I don't think we're seeing any questions come in on that. So I'll just assume that I'm doing a reasonably good job of explaining this, that nobody's had to bring in with questions, and we'll try to get to questions at the end if we have any time left. All right, so with that, I want to move on to really the reason for this webinar, and that's the last form we're going to discuss today, and that's the 338 form, and that is the exclusive buyer's representation with exclusive right to purchase contract, dual agency disclosure, and consent included. And again, it's a fillable form, so you'll see that where I've been able to do that, I've done that with my name and brokerage information. And I want to go through this form and then talk about how I use it. So you'll see there that first you're going to determine how you're going to represent your clients in this exclusive agreement. Either you're going to exclusively represent, or you're going to exclusively have the right to help them acquire. So these can be confusing. I've chosen to use the exclusive right to acquire option here because that essentially ensures you will get paid whether or not they use you to see the property or not. That's kind of boiling it down to the bare bones on why you should look at that, but you should definitely read these and understand them before you decide which one you want to use. That's my business practice, to use exclusive right to acquire. And then you'll see at the bottom of that paragraph that there's a line where you write in the area in which you are going to have that exclusive right. You want to be geographic about that. I don't think you want to say the state of Illinois. I think you shouldn't restrict your client like that. If they decide they're going to invest in property downstate, they shouldn't have to use you for that, because you are certainly not an expert in the markets very much south of where you are, where your association membership exists. So consider how you use that. I will, if I know where they're looking to purchase, I'll write in usually a town name and or a subdivision name if they're that focused on where they're going to look at property. But again, protect yourself. Make sure that how buyers are. All of a sudden, they'll change their mind on where they want to look for property. So using a county or multiple counties might be more appropriate. You determine and agree on that with your buyer clients. And then you'll notice that where my name is filled in, just below that, this is where you're disclosing yourself as a designated realtor. Just like in your listing agreement, where it defines you the realtor by name as their designated realtor. Here we're doing the same thing. And so, this is another way to make sure that we're covering all of our bases in license law, making sure that we've disclosed to them who is representing them. And in this case, it's your name in there. And the way agency works, designated agency, they're getting you and not all the other sponsored licensees in that sponsoring brokerage. It defines that right in that paragraph. Section 2 talks about the term of the agreement. You have two options there. You can do a date-specific expiration, or you can do an auto-renew. I typically will use the date-specific, the first option. I'll usually do anywhere from 6 months to a year, depending on what maybe I think this client's motivations are. You can always get them to sign a new agreement if you're going to move it beyond the initial agreement. And then you'll notice that on the second line of that first option that there's a space to write in a number of days. This is a protection period just like in your listing agreement. 30 days, 120 days, whatever you think that might need to be if the buyer sees a property that may end up purchasing it with somebody else up the road after they abandon you or estrange you, you're protected in this agreement. Section 3 goes into talking about the duties you have as a designated agency or agent. Section 4 talks about sponsoring broker duties. 5 is buyer duties. That goes on to page 2. Section 6, representing other buyers. If you have other buyers looking at the same properties, we have a form for offers that are when you have more than one offer, more than 2 buyers offering on the same property. That's always a possibility. If you're, very productive in your marketplace, there's a form for, I can never remember the term, that's terrible, but it's eluding me right now. Yes, contemporaneous offers. Thank you, Gary. And then Section 7 covers all of dual agency. So if you're using Form 338A, all of this is not in that form because that form does not use dual agency. So if your brokerage doesn't allow dual agency, then you'll want to look at using the other version of the 338 for your purpose. And as is typical, there's a place for buyer's initials underneath that. And then my favorite section after that is Section 8. And this is what sort of guarantees you're going to get paid for what you do. This section talks about what your minimum compensation is for helping them to, with their exclusive right to acquire, or if you've chosen the exclusive representation. If it applies and they make a purchase and it falls within the geographic area that you've agreed to work within in this document, this is your sort of, nothing is fully guaranteed, but this is how you would support your claim for getting paid if for some reason the listing brokerage is not offering in your business mind and business practices an adequate level of compensation. Then you would essentially be asking the buyer to cover the difference, and that's what's on the top line of page 3 there. The difference between the purchase price, the percentage of purchase price, or what the seller's brokerage actually paid to the buyer's brokerage. So that's sort of your your friend if you choose to use it correctly. I'm not going to go through all of the rest of these sections. You can do that when you're having trouble sleeping at night. What I want to talk about, I'll just have Gary show you the very bottom of that. You'll want to have your buyer obviously sign this agreement and date it, and then the right-hand side there is for the sponsoring brokerage and authorized signer. You may be the authorized signer, but you are not the sponsoring broker, so you'll want to write in accepted by and then name your sponsoring broker. It should say print there because that's what it's asking for. And then in the by line underneath that, that's where your sponsoring or managing broker would sign that. If you are authorized in your policy to sign as the authorized signer, you can do that, sign it, date it. Make sure you put your phone numbers there because if this is the only thing your buyers walk away with, you want to make sure that they know how to contact you. You can't be a secret agent on this. You need to disclose how the client or consumer can reach you. All right, so that kind of covers this form. What I want to talk about for the rest or the remainder of our time together here this morning, I want to talk about how to use this document. Some of the concepts that I've found to be successful when you do a buyer's agreement with your buyer. And so, if you're doing pre-counseling with your buyers, that is the optimal time, I think, in my opinion, to be talking about this document. And I talk about it before I get to starting to show them properties on the internet or setting up a search portal to deliver property information to them. I'll talk about, the process first. I'll talk about pre-qualification and affordability, with the client. They may be, their pre-qualification letter may say they're qualified to X, but they may not want to go that high. So make sure you talk about affordability. I think especially the millennial clients or consumers these days, they don't want to be mortgage poor. They want to know in more detail what their payments are going to look like. I always tell them, make sure you include energy into that equation, the cost to actually operate the home, all the utility bills that they're going to have to cover on top of their PITI. So I add an E to the end of that, PITIE, to talk about that. And that'll give them, I think, a much clearer picture on what the, their cost of doing business is going to be on a monthly basis. And I'm finding a lot of them are super or uber interested to find property where the taxes are a little lower. So when you're talking about setting up search portals for them, have that conversation about that criteria. But ultimately, I segue into talking about agency, and I start to talk to them using Form 349, the disclosure we talked about just before the agreement, and I talk about the options that they have as a consumer, and then I explain to them that it is my business practice to use a exclusive right to purchase contract with my buyer clients, and then I explain why I choose to practice that way. Primarily because it's going to help me get through all of the disclosures I need to get through, and it's going to get that in writing, but it's also going to ensure that I get compensated. And I talk to them about being loyal, and hopefully they'll choose to work with me. And if they do, I hope that they would sign this. And I think as you go through this towards the end of your pre-counseling, I think they'll begin to see your value clearly when they understand that you are very professional, that you are going to work for them in their best interests, and that you've taken the time to explain to them the process and how agency works. Because I think, and especially when working with first-time home buyers, they just don't know what they don't know. And until we take the time to actually educate them, again, I know that there are many real estate agents out there that don't take the time to talk about the things they should talk about because they're uber busy and they're trying to churn through the business and work their book of business. But, what I've found over my 18 years in this business, when they value your knowledge, they will come back to you and they will refer you. So I think the more we do to properly educate them along the way during the process, that just bodes well for your book of business in the long term. Take the extra time to talk about what agency is and why they should be loyal to you. You can certainly kindly and gently talk about how, that typically when a consumer pays for professional services, they pay at the time of service. And it's different in our business. We have to wait until the very end in order to be compensated. And if the deal never closes, we worked a whole lot for a whole lot of not too much. And, this just getting them to be loyal and do a signing agreement is definitely a way to make sure that you do ultimately get compensated. And of course, just like any agreement in writing, you can cancel an agreement. I don't think in my 18 years I've ever had a buyer ask me to get out of a buyer's agency agreement because, if you just do a good job and stay with them, you're going to get it done. And then, it's important to talk about the pressures of signing any kind of a contract. What I'll usually do, unless they're a very warm referral or they've done their research and they know that they want to work with me, what I will do is I will always template this document, the 338, and I will send it home with them and let them review it. I tell them and I encourage them, if they have a family or a real estate attorney that they know and they want to review this with them, that by all means do that. I explain to them that typically all of the forms that I use are realtor organization forms or forms that are provided to me, that I do not write these forms myself because we all know that would be practicing law and we don't want to get involved in writing up documents like that. But I tell them these are my state association's documents and I use them because they're very protective of both parties to the agreement. They protect the consumer by making sure they understand agency, and they protect me as their designated agent to make sure I do proper disclosures, but to also make sure that I get compensated properly. Again, sneak it in kindly and gently. You have your business to run, you have a family to support, and you need to make sure that you will get compensated for the work that you do. And after they've had the opportunity to review this document on their own time, what I'll do before sending them home that day or on their way is tell them that when we go out to look at the first property, when we get out of our vehicles and start heading up the driveway, that I'll expect that before we go into the first showing appointment that they'll hand me their signed agreement. And I think that takes the pressure off of I'm not signing, the worry or the concept that I'm not signing anything right now, I'm gonna, I wouldn't want to force my clients or pressure them into doing that. I think that, the old adage that often realtors are only one step ahead of used car salespeople in the trust and respect realm. I think this changes that when you allow your prospective clients to do things more in a comfortable sort of way, so that they're not pressured to feel like they have to sign something they don't want to sign, or sign a contract that they might not have fully read or processed, because by the end of that hour or hour and a half pre-counseling session, they've been drinking out of a fire hose. Probably you've probably been talking their ear off, except to get their criteria for the type of homes that they're looking for. But you're gonna probably be the one doing most of the talking. They're probably going to not be able to process it all anyway. So I'm all about giving them the documents and the visual aids that help them to understand the process and how you'll be representing them and helping them with the single largest purchase of their lifetime, probably. So, so with that, what works for me might not work for you, but definitely consider the concept. As an industry, when I studied for my ABR, my accredited buyer's representative designation, back early in my career, we talked about these agreements, and it's stuck and it resonated with me. And I've used a buyer's agreement, whatever the state association has had, ever since then. And it's just become part of my business practice. We're, as an industry, if all of our buyer agents out there had to legally or by law get a signed buyer's representation agreement, we wouldn't have to have this conversation, because it would be part of our business practice. It's a very small percentage of realtor members that actually use signed buyer's agreements. So, this is a potential paradigm shift in your business, the concept of having these conversations. But I will tell you again that one of the biggest benefits I feel I've enjoyed in my business is that my consumers, my clients, know what they need to know, or they have the resources, or they're not afraid to ask the questions they should ask, because they have enough knowledge to know that they should ask questions. So, think about it. If all of our agents use these, the world would be a whole lot easier. The real estate world would be a whole lot easier to navigate, because we would know these things, and we wouldn't have those potential ethical or arbitration issues that fill up our files in the professional standards realm, because agents behave badly. Agents don't do what they should do at open houses with consumers, or agents don't do what they need to do to educate their buyers about walking into new construction. All those things, we just need to do a better job as an industry, and slow down a little bit, stop going 500 miles an hour, and make sure you take the time to better represent the clients that we serve. So with that, Gary, I don't know if we have anybody chiming in, and I think we're about out of time, so certainly give another second here in case anybody has a question. So we'll just kind of, not seeing anything come in, so we'll just kind of wrap up here. Hopefully you've learned something today, and hopefully the webinar series that your association is working on will become beneficial to you and your offices. I know we've got a couple offices that have logged in today and full in their conference room, so that's awesome that they've done that. Hopefully Hopefully I've brought some value to, at least if nothing else, the way you think about buyer's agency and the way in which we serve the public. So with that, I think Gary's just doing some closing remarks. Thank you all for the opportunity. I'd like to thank the Hometown Association for allowing me to visit with you today, and for Gary Spangler, myself, and your association executive, Heather Weidrich, and your president, Patty Martinez. We thank you, and feel free. My contact information is up there. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop me a text, an email, or give me a call. So thank you all again. Have a wonderful day, and go sell houses.